Hello everyone, welcome to Naomi's Bookshelf. Today I'd like to discuss my thoughts of reading the first 5 books of the Bible. So I have this intention this year to read and discuss maybe with you if that's something you guys would all like. Please leave a comment down below if you'd like this kind of idea. To discuss my experience reading the whole Bible in its intention, or at least my intention of this series. I also would like to read them all in order, so I'm not jumping around from section to section. I'm literally going from Genesis all the way to Revelation. That's my hope and intention. So my plan is to do it that way. See, when I have started doing this Bible study in January, I had a revelation. Well, we were doing this Bible study with my women's group, and in it we were talking about how the Israelites were not doing Bible reading to just read the Bible. They had no Bible to read. So they were learning the Bible books in order, and they would not have started in Exodus. They would have started in Genesis. And I thought, why don't I do the same? I have not read Genesis in a very long time, so I should. And I also felt convicted because of my health condition and because of my migraines and the ability to physically read a Bible during the day, I felt like I was not able to coherently do that. And then I felt convicted by my lack of chapter reading, shall we say, per day. And I am being very open and honest here. So I would hope that everyone please be civil in the comments. I will be monitoring the comments for this video, just so you know. But when I was doing this, I felt convicted that I had not finished full books of the Bible in a very long time. So I knew that God wanted me to do this. So I started in Genesis and I continued reading. And before I knew it, I had finished 2 books of the Bible in a week. I finished Genesis and Exodus in a week. And I wanted to keep going. So I read all the way through and I finished Deuteronomy in February. So that was my intention, to finish the first 5 books of the Bible. And then I am planning on continuing on. So this is kind of an ongoing project for me, and because of how I intended on reading the first 5 books of the Bible, I had an interesting experience. Because of that, I feel like I had some new insights, and this is something that I would like to share with you. So I hope that this will be something interesting and something enjoyable. This is just something that I discovered. I did attend Bible college, but it was not for seminary. I did not attend as a seminary student, and I would just like to clarify that right off the bat. That does not give me leeway to not be correct about the Bible, but I also want to say that does not give me intentions to, or the qualities to be utterly perfect in all the commentaries, because that's something else about this Bible study that we've been doing, is not to look at commentaries while we're doing the Bible study, and I took that to heart. So let's get into this. I've been talking for a while without actually talking about it. Something I definitely noticed while going through was how the family history was so important to the Israelites, because I was definitely going through this read through with a mindset, and I still am. It's going to be less so going forward, because at that point, as writing starts to become more, available, that's going to change. But for this point, I definitely was more in this mindset. I saw the importance of family line, of heritage, really coming through in Genesis. I felt like that was such a core value of what a wandering Israelite would need to know, especially someone who had been left in Egypt for 400 years. I felt like that was something if I was in that position, I would want to know and need to know, as I would be going into another unknown place. That's really how I approached all of these different like books and different stories. I also really found these different stories of sin and these different stories of wandering away really powerful in that regard, because it really showed the importance of staying true to the faith and also being really cognizant of what is around you and what can drive you away. I felt like in the story of Lot and his daughters, I felt like that was an important story. For examples, if anyone is wondering, I will leave a Bible reference here in case you're wanting to check it out. It's quite an interesting story in the Bible, I will just say. But it was interesting because I feel like it taught me, or would have taught the Israelites as well, to be on guard and to be alert and present. Yeah, that's just interesting, an awkward thing for me to tell you. But anyways, kind of things like that. And then also when it came down to the 12 tribes and how they were created, that was such a critical moment, I think, in the entire book of Genesis, because I mean, all of those things were critical, but when it came down to the creating of the tribes, like that's crucial as they are being developed, when they are coming into this new promised land. Because thinking about those wandering Israelites, they needed to know who they were. They needed to know who their God was, and they needed to know that they had a place belonging to them. So in Genesis, that really sets the foundation. I found that it was really critical to me, and especially when I found that verse. I found that one verse in Genesis 13, I think it was 16, not 16. Anyways, I'll put the reference up here as well, where God tells Abraham that his children or his descendants will be enslaved for 400 years and that they will then come to a promised land. And it was like, he told Abraham that. And I feel like that would have been just such a critical thing to hear as an Israelite. And I felt like that was just such a big idea moment, like a light bulb moment for me. Those kind of things. And then, of course, the 12 tribes being created through the 12 sons, and knowing that that's a critical thing as well for them to know where their lines are from, like why they connect in a certain way. But then also, as they continue to go forward into Exodus, why they've been treated this way, what's going on. And then as I continued forward into the book of Numbers and Leviticus, well, Leviticus first, then Numbers. But Leviticus stood out to me as something really interesting, because Exodus was all about them getting out and learning core rules, right? Core values of God, and learning how to be in his presence and learning how to wander with him. Leviticus seems really weird if you just read it out of context. And it just seems like a lot of rules. It just seems like how to do this, how to make a sacrifice, how to do that. And it's really quite a gory book. But I felt like I had an eye-opening moment, and it's about purity. It's about keeping yourself focused on God and not allowing yourself to be distracted by the idols that you are going to be entering into the promised land with. Like the idols that are there already, don't be distracted by them. Focus on God. It was all about that. And it was just so interesting to have that perspective when you read it all in context. If you don't just read Leviticus by itself, it has to follow Exodus, because you have to read it knowing that Exodus happened, where they just left a place full of idols and they're going into a place where there's tons of people with idols. You have to have that kind of correlation, I think. And at least that's what I did. So when they had Leviticus, when God put Leviticus right there, it's because you need to know why they're there to worship in a certain way, why they're supposed to sacrifice in a certain way, why they're supposed to be sacrificing for certain things. What's the feast? Why are they important? What do they mean? And why are you supposed to keep doing them every year? Why are you supposed to tell your children about them? All of these things are so critical in the book of Leviticus, and it just seems like a book of rules. But it's not, because it's just so important to their longevity. These things will keep them sustained as they live among people, or as they live among a land where people do not worship God. These things will help them focus on what's really important and help them stay with their God and not drift back to other idols, drift away to other religions. This will help them. And I saw that very clearly as I continued to read book by book by book. So the next book was Numbers, and that one is about the counting of the people. You'd think that's it. But actually, it has so many more stories weaved in and out of it. And I think it's more about, yes, knowing how many people are there, but at the same time, it's really about knowing what's going on with the people of God during that time. They're wandering, they're going through places, they're going through situations, and you know that they're still having trouble, they're still going through things, they're still not happy. And all of these times they are complaining, they are struggling, and yet God is present with them. And yet their numbers are still there. They still have the people there. And I felt like God called a census, I think for maybe a reason. This is maybe just me thinking, but I feel like in a way God maybe just called a census to say, you have numbers. You are not dead here. I don't know if that's just me being fanciful or not, but that's just kind of what I saw as part of it too. There were so many people listed, and yet it said this person and all of his clan, this person and all of his clan, and the numbers were staggering. And it's like God can feed all of them every single day and give them water every single time, and they are not dying off, even though they are struggling. And in those moments, we got Nahum with the donkey. We got all these different strange stories, and I think it's an interesting and fascinating book to read and have these little stories peppered in when you think it's just a book about counting people. But reality, I think, is these people are important because they symbolize, I think, how big the people of God really are there, and also how they might be struggling with certain things, but the people of God are growing. I think that's what it means. But also, if we know that the people of God are there, and that's how many there are, we also know that in Deuteronomy, at the end of Deuteronomy, they're going to be entering into the promised land because it's been foretold to them. So we know at the beginning of Joshua, that's where they're going. So we also have to take into account that those are the numbers. And as soon as those numbers of the people who are under the age of 40 at the time, or under the age of 20, sorry, I said the wrong number there, under the age of 20, who at the time of the first entrance into the promised land by spies, those people who were under that age are going to go into the promised land. So we know that those numbers are also impacting who's going to enter soon. So I think that's also an important note to think of as well. So then Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy, I think some people could look at and think it's boring. It's ridiculous. And it's just a repeat. It's just a repeat book. And it's not. Because of looking at it through the eyes of, first of all, Moses wrote the whole first 5 books. So he knew what he was writing the first time around. He didn't need to rewrite everything that he wrote in Deuteronomy because a lot of the things are repeats. But secondly, he knew that the people like to forget. They like to forget things, and they like to complain, and they like to say, but what about this time? But you haven't given us this. He knows that. He's with them a long time. And he also knows that he is dying soon. So in Deuteronomy, it's a lot of repeat. It's a lot of repetition. And I think that that's there for a very important reason. So first thing is that in Deuteronomy, we get a lot of repeat stories from the Exodus on. We get a lot of repeat stories of how they survived, of what God provided in the wilderness, of what they have done, of battles they have won, of what God has done for them. And the book is basically a repeat of everything. It has basically the Cliff Notes. It has the Spark Notes edition, if you want to call it that, of the middle 3 books, we should say, of the first 5 books of the Bible, of the Pentateuch. And I think it's really interesting if you look at it like that, because basically it has those little things. It has the big deal things. It has the things where you're like, if you would forget everything else, if you forget everything else about the Leviticus, this is what you need to know. I'm very passionate, apparently. I'm dropping things. But that's kind of what it's saying. It's saying, if you need to know anything, if you've forgotten every other rule I've said, this is what you need to know. Or if you've forgotten everything else about what God has done for you, don't you remember this? So I think that's what it's trying to tell you when it's saying, don't forget, don't forget. So in complete thought, I think that Deuteronomy is a book of reminding. I think it is about telling you and reminding you of everything that you need to know before you walk away from your final thoughts. I do think that it's a great way to wrap up a 5-book series that Moses wrote. In the beginning of the whole series, you have Genesis, which talks about the beginning of the world. You have the beginning of a nation. You follow that line and you see how that group became a family of 12 sons and how that chaotic family grew into many people, of 70 going into Egypt. And then that 70 people turned into way more leaving. And then you have that many millions of people leaving after 400 years. But those 400 years were years of suffering and heartache. And then you have them wandering in the wilderness for 40 years while they are learning God's sacrifice rules and obedience rules and how to live for him when they have not been living in the way that God has asked for 400 years, as they have been slaves. You also then have them learning how to trust him through battles, through food, through water. You have all of these things in the course of these 4 books. Then you meet Joshua, who is crucial for moving forward. You need to know who the next leader will be for this people who are wandering in the wilderness, and they need a leader. They need someone who they can trust after Moses is gone. And Joshua is the perfect person, but you need to meet him in order to see that as you go forward. So Joshua is introduced. Then you have this book of Deuteronomy that wraps it all up nicely, and Joshua is reintroduced at the very end. So Moses says, don't forget, this is the guy to follow. Then in the very last chapter, you have Moses who gets to go up and see the promised land, though he will never enter. And then he dies, and you can only assume that it was Joshua, or at least I only assume that it was Joshua who wrote that final chapter. And this is what wraps up this oral story that the Israelites would have told themselves as they were traveling, as they were wandering, as they were learning the rules, learning the ways to honor God, learning the ways to honor and sacrifice and worship. I think that this is a really powerful way to look at the first 5 books of the Bible, and I learned so much. My eyes were so opened, especially reading them in order, and especially as I was realizing, if you look at the Bible like a series, you wouldn't read book 4 before you read book 2. You read them in order, and I am so thankful that I have. And so I am reading book 6 right now, being Joshua, and then I will be hopefully coming back to you with an update after I have read maybe the next 5 or 6 books. We'll see how that goes, but I just thought that the first 5 books really made an impact, and because they are such a cohesive 5, that they seem to be well-rounded for this kind of introduction, I don't know, part of my series. Let me know if you would really like to have this be something I continue. Like I said, I was not a seminary student. I did go to Bible college, but not for seminary. So I'm just doing what I have read and have learned through Bible study and through going to church and discussion. But I would love to hear your thoughts about the first 5 books of the Bible, and I would love to discuss that down below in the comments with you. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you'll stick around if you would like to subscribe, and thumbs up if you enjoyed as well. But yes, I'll see you next time. Bye for now.